Hello, everybody. Welcome to In the Doll World. I'm your host, Georgette Taylor, and as always, I'm so excited that you're joining me today to listen to amazing conversations with these amazing doll artists and creators from around the world. And today is no exception. My guest today is Flora Ekpe-Idang. She is the founder and CEO of Corage Dolls. Corage Dolls is a multicultural doll and book company that helps to elevate, educate, and encourage girls of color to be unstoppable. And I want to say thank you so much. I'm excited by the word unstoppable. It's just when I read it, I just feel so powerful when I say that. So thank you for including that into your description of your company, because I think that's really so important. And thank you, Flora, for joining us in the doll world.
Yes, thank you so much, Georgette. It's such a pleasure to be here. I've definitely, seen you feature other amazing multicultural founders and those who are creating amazing representation and more dolls on shelves. So I'm glad to be added to that list and have an opportunity to connect with you.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you're part of the list. I'm glad that you're doing what it is that you do, because I think there are, so many more people are needed to be able to do exactly what you do. And I just want to thank you for doing that within this space. So, um, I just want you to share with our listeners a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and also a little bit more about your doll journey, why you created the doll and the journey beyond just thinking about.
Yeah.
I know as a former doll creator myself, I know the thought is one thing, the journey is another. So,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. So just share a little bit about that with us. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So I am from East Orange, New Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. I'm actually now living back in New Jersey. I'm also a first generation American, and I played such a very big role. My mother is from Grenada. I call it the Island of Spice. So those who may not know it, it's the Caribbean. And then my father is from Nigeria. And so being able to grow up in a household that really I consider the best of both worlds, considering the diaspora and thinking about the beauty of seeing Black culture, seeing Black art, seeing the connection to history was important for me. And it also played a role in being able to grow up and seeing dolls. My mom was very particular about me having dolls that reflected who I looked like and what I am, but also having dolls of other ethnicities and races too. Um, I went to college out in California, did my undergrad at Pepperdine and studied advertising there. Had a chance to study abroad in China too, and that kind of gave me a awareness of like international marketing and this notion of how to connect with people in a different, unique, multicultural way. But really spent years working as well, like in the space of advertising, working particularly on multicultural advertising has been a heavy other part of my background too, thinking about Black, Latino, and Asian audiences and how to meaningfully connect with communities that are always being considered as priority
Mhm.
in marketing and messaging. And then also what really kind of brought the journey is when I went to grad school. And right before that, I had a chance. Well, sorry, when I was in grad school, I really wanted to focus on starting my own business. I kind of went to Babson College right outside in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and kind of I'll get into my story about how Corage Dolls came to be, but it was when I joined grad school that I really decided that I wanted to actually take the idea and actually work on it, and using that opportunity over the course of that time to take time to intern at big toy companies, but
Mhm.
also work on how to create and build this business. And very much learning the highs and lows of that, and working on creating Corage Dolls. But what really kind of got me on this pathway to creating this business was when I was in high school. Kind of that
Mhm.
aha moment for me was when I was watching the documentary that the test, should I say, that many people have probably seen, but the doll test. It
Mhm.
was a test that's been done since the 1940s to study the impact of segregation on young Black children, especially play such a pivotal experiment in the board versus education case to integrate schools.
Mhm.
And I watched this documentary in my junior year of high school called A Girl Like Me, and it was studying the impact of colorism on dark skinned girls. And they did that doll test
Mhm.
again years later.
You're referring to the doll test that the doctors
Yes.
Kenneth and Mamie Clark did. Hmm.
Yes, yes. So this documentarian, she decided to do it again years later, just to
Hmm.
see like have we made much progress? have we changed much? How do young children, especially young Black children, perceive themselves? And ultimately, it garnered the same results. And that was my first time actually seeing, because I
Mhm.
didn't know about the test prior to that.
Right.
Um, but seeing these young Black children who are already having these perceived notions of like, I'm not good enough,
Mhm.
having this idea that like of internalized racism,
Yes.
and this feeling that like, hey, yes, the white doll is associated with beautiful, with beauty, with kindness, and the Black doll is associated as the other.
Mhm.
And that just stuck with me. And that was something that I watched in high school. And I did not know what I wanted to do with that thought or the idea. But I was like, man, I grew up in a household that showed representation. But I also knew that every time I walked out of the door, I didn't see that representation that my parents tried to instill that pride in me.
Right.
And it was very much something that was like dolls, and they bring such joy. They're one of the first items a child has when they're building their imagination, thinking about this idea of creativity. And for me, it started this journey of spending years,
Mm.
mentoring young girls of color, being able to go and visit doll stores and just
Yeah.
peruse toy aisles and trying to understand this notion of like parents talking about the hunt of not being able to find much dolls that reflected their children, or having to go so far out to find it, or homogenous options, and ultimately seeing a white doll painted black, and
Mhm.
that being what's supposed to be good enough.
Right. Right.
And ultimately, it was when I was just, entering into grad school all these years later where it just stuck with me. I was like, you know what? Let me go and try a chance to go and, work at toy companies and see how they are actually, thinking about this change in demographics.
Mhm.
How do we think about really communicating and building products that reflect what America looks like today? And it was a struggle. It was a struggle. I think when I, loved the companies that I got to be at, but I think it was still the bare minimum of
Yeah.
it still was felt in essence like, how do we still think about just giving just enough? Maybe we'll have one doll, one shade, one this, different hair type. And so when I was just, in my grad school journey, I was like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of waiting around. My goal was I want to revolutionize American Girl with the new
Mhm.
American Girl,
Mhm.
and Corage Dolls ended up being spawned in that way to really decide, like, I'm gonna actually truly devote time
Mhm.
and go through this journey. And so when he was an advertiser and marketer to transition to becoming, I guess, a doll manufacturer, a doll maker, I guess you wanna position
Yes.
it that way.
Mhm. I love your story because you bring in so many powerful areas of what it is that you do now, right? You went to school for business, right? You study marketing and advertising, right? You intern at a doll company. So I mean, you know the ins and outs of being able to get a doll at least seen, and I think that's the most important part, right? Because a lot of times people have an idea because I do
Mhm.
believe that you had also said that there's like I think the doll, what did you say about 30%? You said that
Yes,
there was
yeah. When I did my own research,
mhm.
I would go to stores, and when I did the math, like, less than 30% of the shelves even had dolls of color.
Right, exactly, which I think is just like I don't even think it's gotten any bigger. I mean,
Yeah.
and if it has,
Yeah.
it's been with just one company, one major
Yeah.
doll company, right? And so you look at that, if it's under 30%, and that's probably a high, that's still probably a high percentage in some communities. Some communities
Mm.
don't really have
Mhm.
any dolls of color. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That percentage is not that high in other places.
Yeah.
So if that's all that you know and that's all that you see when you go into the store, you are missing so many more doll
Yes.
creators out there and doll artists, that are showcasing dolls of color, and that are making dolls of color. So
Mhm.
I find that interesting. I know you said that when you were working at these doll places, you realized that what was the inner workings of that? I mean, did they just not? I mean, I don't want to say they didn't care. I mean, I guess sometimes they didn't care. They didn't think it was important. But what kind of inner workings did you really find to be in there that they weren't showcasing dolls of color or
Yeah,
multicultural dolls?
yeah, and I wanna definitely say, like, the companies that I work, they're amazing, and they're
Right.
very
No,
good
and I understand.
toy
Yes.
company, they're amazing companies. And I think as I just started to take some time, like, I started to engage with, like, the teams that
Mm-hmm.
also were creating dolls. And I think there was honest, like, there was intention of
Right.
like, hey, we want to do this right. We want to show representation, but the prioritization of like, what does it mean to design and
Mm.
create versus
Mhm.
like, we're just going to create another version. I
Right.
that was the difference. It
I
was like,
see.
how do you really think about designing, leading
Mhm.
with a Black girl, leading with
Right.
what does that do, and versus like, hey, we just have a various selection of dolls. One of them is just gonna happen to be this.
Right.
And like, and I think the idea of being able to understand like how are you connecting with the culture? How are you
Mhm.
understanding and talking further with parents and kids? Like
Right.
I would actively do that in
Yes.
terms of understanding like what were kind of nuance. Like that's how I found out more about what the hunt represented, by being on this constant search and not being
Mhm.
able to find dolls. Or hey, they settled for like American Girl. No offense to American Girl, but the
Right.
notion of like, hey, yes, Abby was their first Black doll, but it was a runaway slave. Addie was
Right.
a runaway slave.
Right. Right.
And I had Addie. I didn't know that context when I was younger, but that was the only option for some of
Mhm.
us.
Right.
And so you're left with such a lack of options, and
Yeah.
so that's what you're making do. But like the parents and the kids that I was engaging with, they were like, I want more. When they saw, Corage Dolls and they saw our brand, they were so excited to see, like, a young girl would come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, she has hair like mine,
Mhm.
she looks like me,
Right.
she looks like my sister, I wish I had this growing up. And that idea of bringing that level of authenticity and
Mhm.
representation that was designed
Right.
first and
Yes.
foremost leading versus keeping us as an afterthought.
Right, exactly. No, and I can understand what you're saying when it comes to that, because I mean, unless they have people of color, right, or multicultural people in there, it's very hard for them to have a perception of how to start creating a doll. You know what I mean? That is multicultural or that is African American. But I think that also leads into the fact that how important it is to bring people of color and bring other people into the fold of these
Mhm.
companies, right? Because they understand what that doll's supposed to look like. They have a better understanding of what that hair is supposed to look like, or what that design of the clothes is supposed to look like. I mean, I
Mhm.
think that that's why when Byron Lars, who's one of my favorite designers of dolls, right? I happened to have him on the show, and I was just so ecstatic to have him on the show. But I think the reason that his dolls, I mean, granted, he's an amazing designer, but the reason that his dolls were so important back then was that he created these ethnic looking dolls, and these
Mhm.
African styles, and this designs that nobody had seen before when it came to fashion dolls. And so I think because of the fact that he was there and he understood that, being an African American male, you know what I mean? He understood what that was like, and what the clothes should look like, and what the hair looks like. And I mean, it's the first time I ever seen a doll with a haircut like mine. It was just
Mm.
amazing. I mean, he was just brilliant in his designs and what he chose to do there. I mean, he actually even created a skin tone, that they use now
Mhm.
because of that. And I think that's so important. What you said, it's not that the companies are bad or anything like that, but if you're not incorporating other people, to show what the outside world looks like, then it's very
Yeah.
hard to design a doll that represents that. You
Yeah,
know,
I
so.
yeah, I agree with you. I think like so like one of the things that was so critical for me when I was starting off and thinking about, okay, I'm not naturally a doll maker. Like, I don't come from a doll background and how to, yes, I work for toy companies, but the
Right.
process of even
Process
doing
is
this
different. Yes.
is very different from taking it to your point as an idea to actually like creating something. I remember creating like a sketch with my horrible artistic writing, and I asked a classmate, I was like, hey, can you help me? Like, what I would do is I would just kind of put together a collage of images. Like
Mm-hmm.
I did work on putting together a collage of 50 different faces of
Wow.
young Black girls, because I was like, though I can't draw, I'm not that good at drawing, and I don't yet have a designer to help me with this. I really want to make sure that the features are authentic. I want to
Mm-hmm.
see a fuller nose. I want to see high cheekbones. I want to be able to see
Mm-hmm.
that, because even dolls I had still didn't have that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so when I eventually got an artist to help me kind of take the image of the drawing and the collage and put it in, like, it was so important for me as every step of the way, engaging with parents, talking to kids,
Mhm.
just continue to think about going back to the authenticity and seeing
Mhm.
representation that I wasn't seeing on shelves,
Right.
and thinking about, like, the parents and kids throughout all that process,
Mhm.
especially leading particularly with Black girls.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great that you did that though. The fact that you had the thought that yes, I mean there, because I'm sure by the time you started to create that, they did have African American dolls on the shelves. I
Yeah,
understand that it wasn't like it was totally bare or barren.
yeah,
But like you said, but to create the face that with the features that represented a lot of the young girls that you probably were around or that you knew or looked like you when you grew up, and I think
mm,
that's really so important because a lot of times you can see African American dolls, but again, those features don't represent kind of
yeah,
what a lot of us look like. So
yeah,
yeah, so I think that was really really cool that you did that. So after you decided to create these 50 different types of looking dolls or faces, I should say, how did you go about then? What was the process for you? I know what it was like for me, but I wanted you to share what's the process for you after you said, okay, I got these. This is the face that I want. Boom. What do you
yeah.
do with that?
Once I had the collage, I literally just reached out to a website. There was a website that I used called 99 Designs, if anyone's aware of that. And it's a site where you can kind of crowdsource. You could put out like a request for a proposal and be like,
Mhm.
hey, I'm creating this and
Mhm.
I'm looking for someone to ultimately design what this, based off of this height, these kind
Right.
of dimensions. And then people had submitted
Mhm.
various designs for me. And then the one that I really connected with, I was like, I don't want her to have a thigh gap. I want her to have a thigh. That's why I love that you have, plus size dolls
Yeah.
as you did, because I want to learn more about how you did that. But I was like, I don't want to be her to be a stick figure, and I don't want her to be hollow. And I want her to have hair. So, and then once
Mhm.
I found a great designer and started working with them on kind of various iterations and CAD designs and working
Mm.
through how to actually get the doll to that point. Then started the journey. Once I finally got the CAD design that I wanted, the journey of finding a manufacturer.
Yeah.
I Oh my goodness. It definitely was a not so fun journey. It was a learning curve. It still is, in all honesty,
Mhm.
still a learning curve. And I remember when I would take my classes in my MBA program, I was taking like operations and supply chain and trying to literally ask my professors, like, okay, so I'm dealing with this situation. Like, I was like, I'm paying all this money. I might as well use this for my
I
business.
know that's the truth. Oh
I was
man,
like, I'm getting
that is great.
right,
Yes.
I'm getting all my money out of this program, and will try to literally apply what I was learning in class, honestly, to talking with a manufacturer. My first manufacturer I found literally was I just found them because I was looking at someone else's
Somebody else's
Kickstarter campaign.
dolls. Oh,
Yeah,
Kickstarter
I was
campaign.
looking at someone's
Okay.
Kickstarter campaign
Mhm.
who had a doll business, and I
Mhm.
happened to track down and find their manufacturer, and reached out to them. Um, I was very young in my thinking of like, oh yeah, let me just like we'll get everything worked through all these logistics. And I remember my goal was I want to be able to, like, by the time I graduate from my program,
Mhm. Mhm.
launch my crowdfunding campaign. So I would have the pre-sales plan, I would have all the things worked through my manufacturer. And my manufacturer screwed me over. Manufacturer, I learned the hard way in terms of like I
Yes.
saw the first start of the design, started getting some emails, phone calls, and then as I started to get the second phase of money
Oh,
and started to try to understand, like, hey, I'm not necessarily seeing, um,
right.
what's the next iteration of it all? Like, who is my main point of contact?
Mhm.
What's the lead time? When are we gonna do all these extra stuff? And it just became less and less I started to hear from my manufacturer.
Wow.
And then as it started to get closer to me graduating, um, I remember one time just having a phone call with the manufacturer because I was so pissed off and they had changed their supplier midway without telling me. And I just remember being in the hallway of my school and I just remember like almost breaking
I
down.
was gonna say, were you just literally crying?
I
Because
was like,
I'm
I
so,
was crying. I
yeah.
was crying because I was just like, how did it get to this point? For me, I'm like kind of blaming myself because I'm like, how did I like not see the signs in this way, let it go this far, but also how. I remember, yeah,
Mm.
it was definitely a hard lesson learned. And then
Wow.
fortunately, after fortunately, a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, like she, because I was going to like the New York Toy Fair to just try to
Mm-hmm.
meet
Right.
people
Mm-hmm.
using my student pass because I had no money. It's like get the student discount. I was using every resources I could in school, and that was definitely a privilege that I had in that way. But I very much was able to have get connected to someone, and then from there, they were like, "Hey, you may want to connect with this manufacturer. They're based here." And so this time around, I made sure, like, okay, let me try to go in asking these key questions. Well, let me go in with perusing the contract, getting someone to review things. Let me
Mm-hmm.
make sure I understand the lead time. Who is my main point of
Mm.
contact? All the things, and was able to finally get the process going with going
Mm.
from the CAD design to getting, the actual carving of the doll, to getting
Right.
the actual mold of it, to getting choosing the hair, the eyes, all the process.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like, being able to finally get the doll, the
Yay.
doll, getting Aaliyah. And really just like, just taking, even if I knew it was going to take a bit longer than what I planned, yes, I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to, I realized, okay, I'm not going to have my crowdfunding campaign right after I graduate, but I want to really be intentional.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning through that process with manufacturers, but that was definitely a challenge and a
Yeah.
key, one of the key lessons, and trying to think about how to navigate this toy manufacturing space.
Yeah, it can be really challenging. I think back to, when we started, and this has been 20 something years. I mean, when I listen to your story and you say, oh, you get a design, you get a CAD drawing, you get all that. And I'm thinking, yeah, we had none of that. Like we
Mm,
had a mold. We had clay, and then we had a wax mold. We didn't.
yes.
Yeah. So I mean, all the
I
things
had those
that,
parts too. I had those parts too. But
yeah.
yes, the CAD design was
Yeah,
something.
we didn't have a CAD design. We somebody sketched it and they had an artist like, sketch it out again.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh yeah, that's what it looks like. Okay. And then let's put it in some clay and then let's get that done. But it can be really challenging, like you said, finding a manufacturer, finding people that you could trust. So,
Yeah.
that I think that's the biggest thing. And even still in this time, manufacturers are not something that people really just share. It's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna like do you any disservice, right? By sharing what it is
I
that
agree. I
or the manufacturer, but it still could be very challenging finding a good manufacturer. And also I think finding a manufacturer that does a small run, that's a whole nother thing. So how many runs
agree.
did you do for your doll?
Yeah, no, like I will say, like the first run that I did, like I just did a small, I was like, let me just do like 250. And I had to increase it a bit. I was planning to do less, but it became really even further harder to even like get anyone to go under 500 or
I
1,000.
was gonna say that's great. 250. I mean, to even get somebody to do that run for that
I know
price was amazing.
I had to also negotiate a bit with like I had to negotiate a bit with the company to even get that. And like I'm working on preparing for like the next run and kind
Okay.
of building further from there. And I'm in the process of kind of like even exploring new manufacturers because my manufacturer was impacted with COVID and a lot of things
Yeah.
there, and
Mm-hmm.
that caused a lot of things in general with the business. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to your point about like that minimum, quantity order,
Yes.
and getting brands to kind of manufacturers to be on board when you say that you're trying to come, because I did come with less. I did try to go lower, and
They're
it
like,
became,
yeah, no.
they were like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, we're not
Not
doing
and I
that.
and I, I just to like transition even as well, like when I wanted to create new doll clothes, I
Mm-hmm.
was initially, trying to use the same manufacturer above, but they were like, no, we cannot do any more kind of like smaller runs what we have. And I was looking for a very small amount. I was like 50 outfits. Let's just test out
Oh
50
no, that
outfits.
wasn't gonna happen. That was
And
50. No.
this is the other, the same doll, Aaliyah, but different outfit. So
Okay.
outfit, I call it her COVID lounge set, but when like a year, like 2 years ago or a year or
Mhm.
so ago, I was like, okay, I was wanting to work on creating the next doll,
Right.
but when having issues with manufacturers, like, okay, let me look to extend with more clothing, other options. Let
Mhm.
me really think
Mhm.
about that. And when I was trying to find a supplier, I couldn't find one overseas, but was looking in the States and trying to think about costs. And I was like, okay, are there any places, and it's hard to like that can do doll clothes, comfortable doing doll clothes and comfortable doing it at this
Not
quantity
the quantity, right?
that I
Yeah.
wanted. And I spent months going through different sites, doing interviews with
Oh,
people, and because that was hard. I tried to find context and nothing. I would get nothing. Eventually, months later, doing research, I found a company in Ohio and was
nice.
able to work with them on doing the doll, the clothing run for like 50. I was
Oh, that's
okay.
good. Okay,
Yeah. So I
that's
was like,
really
and
good.
what we ended up doing was like, okay, I want to do like, well, let me take that back. I think we ended up doing like 100 and
Okay,
something total, and
that's
we maybe
still.
did like 25 shirts,
Mhm.
scrunchies.
So,
We
right,
did
right.
clothing.
So, okay, a total
Yeah,
of 100. Right.
and
Okay. Mhm.
yeah, and they were great to work
That's
with,
great.
and like, but it was like finding a needle in a haystack.
That is the truth. It's so funny because I mean, when we started, like I said, it was 20 something years ago. And so, first of all, the internet was not as robust as it is now. I mean,
Mm,
at all. And so just trying to connect with those people, which is very, 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 very challenging. It wasn't that easy to just go and find them.
no,
So if it wasn't that easy then, and it's still not that easy now, you, you people who want to make dolls are very much focused on making a doll
that-
because it can be like we used to talk early in our shows, it can cost you like a house, pretty much spending the money that you spend on that. So but I'm glad you were able to find the people to help you through that process. So when you started creating that, when you came up with the idea of what they looked like, how did you come up with who she was going to be?
Yeah, so our first doll in the line is Aaliyah. So first of all, the name Aaliyah, I loved the R&B singer growing up. She was like, I loved. So I knew if I was ever going to create anything, I was like, it's going to have to pay homage to Aaliyah. But
Nice.
particularly when I was thinking about her character, because I was like, you know what? I don't want to just have just a doll. I also want to have stories that
Yes.
are really just like impactful for young girls and boys, and like can teach them about, career development, can teach them
Mm.
about just this idea of being unstoppable. And like
Mm-hmm.
there isn't this limit to what especially young Black girls and any other, but particularly Black girls can achieve. And when I was thinking about kind of like her story and her character, it was very particular on, okay, I was looking at just the inspiration of so many young girls like out there, like Marsai Martin, the Miss Flint,
Mm-hmm.
young girls who were like 12 and 11 years old at the time, Marley Davis, like all these kids who were creating businesses or starting production companies or being activists in their
Right,
local
right.
neighborhoods. And I was like, man, this generation today, like granted, I'm part, but I mean like the next generation, the younger generation going on right now, maybe through social media, maybe through technology, but they really are no longer just waiting on adults to kind
Mm-hmm.
of go out there and make change
And
or
make
want
change,
to
right.
figure
Make
out
something
how to
happen. Yep.
make something happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was inspired by that. And so I really felt like with the first character of Aaliyah, I said, I want her to really be a reflection of that. And I was very particular. We're like, man, I want her to really lean into entrepreneurship. I said, there's kids today trying to start entrepreneurship. The journey of entrepreneurship isn't like, oh yeah, you put your idea on a napkin and then bam, you get all this money and you got Facebook or other companies or things like that nature. But especially for women of color, especially
Mm-hmm.
for Black women, it is a journey to start a business. Black women are, the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of times out of necessity. It's not just because
Yes.
like, hey, we just decided when it's out of necessity, but also getting the support in that
Yes.
capital and the resources is so important. So I really wanted to have Aaliyah's character be someone that was from a neighborhood that can be relatable. I chose Chicago and wanted that to be part of her story because
Mm-hmm.
when I was creating the character, I felt like Chicago yes, it gets such a bad rap so much in the media from a crime standpoint, but there's so much history and rich
Yeah, it's
culture of
true. Very
how
much.
Chicago has played in Black culture,
Mm-hmm.
American history, and the leaders that have come from there, the businesses that have thrived from there. And so I wanted her character to be someone tied to a local community and like, hey, she's an entrepreneur in the making. She's someone who's an inventor. She sees a problem in her community and she's
Mm-hmm.
always writing down a notebook. I'm someone who always has a notebook and writing down thoughts and ideas. And
Yes.
so one of the key things that Aaliyah carries all the time is a green notebook. And that's
Nice.
also something that I also just, I don't have a green notebook all the time, but like a notebook
Yeah.
writing down inspiration. And so you really see and you really unfold her story, whether you have the doll or whether you have the book that goes with it,
Mm-hmm.
but really wanting to be able to build kind of this idea of like a Corage crew where like you're starting to get introduced to kind of each character and like
Mm-hmm.
what's tied to their community, what's tied to their passion and what they're doing, whether it be business and
Right.
entrepreneurship, whether it be an area, but really focused on teaching kids kind of early career development principles and having something kids can be inspired to based off of what kids are honestly doing today. And just
Yeah.
girls being kick ass, honestly.
You're right.
Sorry if I said that word, but I wanted to
That's
represent
okay.
that.
It's okay. I mean, it's not. You can say that word. It's all right. So let me ask you. Okay, how many dolls do you currently have?
Yes. So right now, I currently have the one Aaliyah.
Okay.
So I'm in the process of working on the next doll and working on kind of getting. So that's where I'm in the process of working with my manufacturer and
Mm-hmm.
getting the next doll up. Past few years, things got definitely a bit delayed with my manufacturer being impacted with COVID and things being
Yeah,
shut
yeah.
down.
I was going to ask you that. How did COVID affect you? I mean, I don't know. Were you in the process of just creating the dolls?
Yeah, so I can give
Okay.
context. So I launched Corage Dolls back in 2016
Mm-hmm.
and got my first Alia. So like did my crowdfunding campaign, raised funds to be able to support,
Okay.
started to be able to like sell the dolls online, doing events, doing doll
Okay.
shows, things
Good.
of that
Mm-hmm.
nature. And then I also then came out with my book. So I wrote a children's book called Don't Give Up Aaliyah, which is this accompanying story that teaches kids about the early principles of entrepreneurship. And so back in like 2000, because it took, my dolls got delayed in shipment. Things happening with new presidencies, tariffs, a lot of things that delayed product. So really got the products out in the market more in 2017. And
Okay.
so by the time of around like 2019, I was really exploring like, okay, let me start working on the new doll, let me start
Mm-hmm.
working on the new book, building a lot of learnings from what I garnered from the first line.
Mm-hmm.
And I also came out with a pin, like affirmation pin. So though I wasn't having the doll out, I was like, okay, let me also create like these
Right.
accessories. Let me work on building out more
Mm-hmm.
items to fill out Aaliyah's story.
Right.
And when I was starting to engage my manufacturer in mid 2019, I was like, okay, so let's start working on like what's the type of material. Like this is what I learned from the previous one. It's a soft vinyl doll,
Mm-hmm.
interested in that lens. Thinking about having it be this type of skin tone, so on and so forth. Once like early 2020 started hitting, I started hearing less from my manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, like, they were like, hey, we have to put everything on hold. We're not
Mm.
right now. We're shutting down. And this was before officially we all
Uh-huh.
found
Yes,
out what was
we
going
found
on.
out. Right.
I also lived in Minneapolis at the time in 2020. And ultimately was like, okay, let me, if I'm not able right now, if God is saying, okay, you're gonna pause on creating dolls and new dolls, like either work on how do I position and market as much as the existing dolls. I did online virtual fairs and doing
Oh,
like
okay.
pushing. So I
Uh-huh.
was trying to figure out still like
Mm-hmm.
I loved being able to go in person and go to a
Yes.
and engage with people because I think, because my doll wasn't on the shelf at toy stores, like I had it
Right.
like virtual, directories, but it's when people are able to touch and feel. Like we have a toy, we have a physical product. People connect with it, especially when they're able to touch and feel it. And so try to figure out a couple ways to do that. I will say that it was definitely hard and a journey and I had to pause on
Mm.
being able to move forward at that time with getting the dolls
Yeah.
and process. And
Mm-hmm.
instead I made a bit of a transition where, right honestly, right after George Floyd was murdered
Hmm.
and living 3 miles away. I live 3 miles
Right.
away from where everything
Wow.
happened. So mentally, a lot of things. That's
Hmm.
where I lived right before I came back to Jersey. And I was like, you know what? Like, how can I also use my brand? Yes, I have the dolls, but I also want to be able to think about another facet of my brand where
Hmm.
either there's a portion of sales that is going directly towards Black-led organizations supporting community initiatives,
Mm.
either
Nice.
focused on young girls, so like I ended up kind of pivoting for a little bit and kind of launching this collection called Cultivate Courage, where
Mm,
it's kind of
nice.
like, and it's the statement was kind of more so brought on like cultivate is such a strong action word, and then courage was a play off of Corage Dolls, in all
Hmm.
honesty, and thinking about like, hey, in a time that we are navigating many things, people were trying to figure out how do you take meaningful action. And
Right.
so this notion of cultivating courage was kind of this mantra. And so it's a line that I have of like shirts, and
Hmm.
I worked with
Okay.
this amazing Black female designer to create the design that is on mugs, shirts, like apparel,
Hmm.
on notebooks and other things.
Mm.
And so like it's all under the Courage umbrella,
Right. Right.
but it's a facet of the brand that specifically is like, okay, we're also a brand that is committed to pouring back specific dollars even back into
Hmm.
Black organizations.
Wow. That's
Um,
great. That's
so yeah,
really, really
so
powerful.
that was like an interesting pivot that was sparked in the midst of having my manufacturer close. And then after that, that's what I started when my manufacturer was still closed, released in 2020, later on this year, 2000, that's what I started working on adding more accessories with clothing.
Okay. All
And
right.
so that's when the lounge set started to come into play.
Hmm.
And then now is now, it took some time to pause. So I was like, okay, let me take a bit of a break as I'm still figuring out things with the business, figuring
Mm.
out
Okay.
how do I find a new manufacturer, working. And so that's kind of the process that I'm in right now,
Okay. All
is
right.
starting to engage and have conversations with new manufacturers to get the next all
The next
up and
doll
running
up and
for you.
running. Okay. Okay. And how many other dolls do you plan? Well, can't really
Oh,
say how many you plan because it could be just tons of them. But I mean,
yes.
let's say the next two dolls. What do you have an idea what careers they're going to be in, or what
Yeah.
what 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 they're gonna be about?
Yes, absolutely. So the next doll that I'm looking at, my goal is to have her be Afro Latina and have her
Okay. Nice.
be focused on STEM. And
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I'm already working through the story because for me, it's like if I'm able to craft the story, it helps me think about it. I already had kind of Aaliyah's story in the back of my even while she was getting designed, but it helped me think about maybe how she may look or like what are
Right.
things about her identity that maybe will come through.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, with the next character, I am thinking about her particularly being a darker melanin and
Mm-hmm.
having that representation of Afro Latina
Right.
identity. Because like sometimes, well, first off, Afro Latina identity doesn't always get portrayed and called out, and let alone dark skin.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
Afro Latina identity. And so I'm also thinking about how can her character also potentially be bilingual, and thinking about, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
exploring it in the process of like engaging, like maybe have the next book
I was
potentially
gonna just say, like, I literally was gonna say that. Yeah, let have the next book. Like you said, yeah,
Yes,
with two languages, a bilingual book or
yes,
something
yes.
like that. I think that would be really, really, really cool to do.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. And then
yeah.
after that, thinking of the next doll, haven't yet figured out with the kind of maybe having her be just of either like specifically another kind of unique city or kind of call out
Mm-hmm.
America. But I'm kind of trying to position her as a little bit of a little activist, not a hardcore activist, but like I don't have her identity yet, but I have
Mm-hmm.
kind of what the inspiration coming off of Miss Flint and
Yes.
what she's done in Michigan to kind of bring attention
Mm-hmm.
to just the lack of clean water.
That story so wrong on so many levels. I just cannot. There's just
And it right, and
it's
for so long,
awful.
and for so long. That's the thing. Not
So
like,
awful.
yeah, yeah,
So, well, I mean, I'm so glad that you're doing, your dolls that way and giving us an opportunity, right? Not just to know about the doll, but like you said, to even learn even if it's not just about history, about entrepreneurship, just about the things that we can have, that we can accomplish, being who we are and showcasing that through dolls. So, what I was going to ask you, which I thought was interesting, and why did you decide to just make younger dolls as opposed to fashion dolls or baby dolls, or you know what I mean? Like, why was that the key area that you wanted to work in?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I had, when I was perusing shelves, when I was doing a lot of research and spending years just trying to think about, and not until I went to grad school, really leaning into it. But I had looked, I thought about, okay, fashion dolls, what is really their purpose there? And I felt like with fashion dolls, you're gonna get the style, you're gonna get that, like, and that's great. But that wasn't the angle I wanted to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
When baby dolls, I thought about that too, but I just felt like, okay, I want the child to feel a connection with this doll that can help build a story.
Yeah.
And when I thought about, like, I know you mentioned the word like unstoppable, how I had that as part of like what my brand mission is. I was very intentional with
Mm-hmm.
using and putting that word in this notion of like, I want young girls and young kids to, like, the word courage derives from courage, and I just kind of took out the U. And
I was going to ask that too, but I'm glad you
and I'll
answered
get it.
that.
Yeah, I'll get into a little bit, but it was with the intention of like, I want girls to feel bold, feel fierce, to feel like I'm not just talking to them about only their look, but really thinking about their
Mm-hmm.
overall well-being.
Right.
And
Gotcha.
because I think that there's an important, yes, there's a representation of like affirming, like, yes, we matter. What's positive story reflect us as Black girls, and affirming that, but also having stories and having topics that speak to young girls and instilling in their well-being,
Mm-hmm.
in their
Mm-hmm.
development.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether it be through what a career could look like, whether it be through like, how they can help their community, whether
Mm-hmm.
it be through that. And so for me, I wanted to really think about this well-rounded notion of having, and I didn't see that in other
Mm-hmm.
products.
I
I
get
felt
that.
like either it was really fashion or baby doll, and so I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to kind of change that landscape.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, yeah, I'm excited about your dolls. Do you so okay, so let's get back to the name. So
Yes.
Courage. Why did you choose that name as opposed I know you're saying it was a play on the word courage, but
Yeah.
you could have did Courage Dolls as opposed to
Yeah.
Courage Dolls. So
Yeah.
why was that a choice for you?
Yeah. Absolutely. So one day I was just sitting in my room and I was writing down, I was kind of like doing like a business canvas or something to like write down, like, what is it? Like I said, I always have a notebook. I always have a notebook.
Me too. I probably got like 4 or 5 of them sitting right next to me over here. So
I do too. I literally, if I showed my rest of my screen, you would see like 5 right now stacked. And I was just like writing down one day, like, man, like if I could just figure out, like, for me, the name had to really represent what
mm-hmm.
I wanted this company to be about. And I was honestly writing down, like, I want girls to feel like, what do I want them to feel when they're interacting with this brand? To feel bold, to feel fierce, to feel courageous. Courage kept popping up, like variations of courage. So what I
Mm-hmm.
did, I literally went to dictionary.com and literally looked up the root word of
Mm-hmm.
courage. And it was courage without the U in like Latin and French.
Mm-hmm. That's what
And I was like,
mm-hmm.
okay, so this word could still have the same. If I go international, which is what the plan is and what I will do to expand the business, it will still have that same meaning overseas in other languages, not every
Mm-hmm.
language, but a number of other cultures that will still represent what this brand is about. And I literally, when I said decided to say courage versus courage, okay, the honest truth as to why I did it that way, the honest truth is because when I thought about Target and how people call it Target, I literally was like, I
That's
literally,
awesome. That's
I
awesome.
literally was like, courage. And I said, maybe we'll give it a unique flair with it
That
too.
is awesome.
Like,
That's a part of your
people,
marketing. That is part of all your marketing and
that is my
business
marketing.
stuff. Exactly.
I cannot draw a doll, but I can do the name of it. So that was literally, and what's so, I don't think I shared this in my story as well, because I just, this is also the other part of me too, but like, I actually also work for Target. So like I, do my business,
Right.
that is my, my passion. And but I also, and I created the name before I even worked at Target. So that's
Mm-hmm.
also like I
That is
work
funny.
for their brand, and I do
Mm-hmm.
multicultural marketing there.
That
And
is wonderful. That is
and
wonderful.
so able to turn the opportunity to turn the role that I have in my career
Right.
to
Exactly.
how do I apply that in my business,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
has been a blessing
Yeah.
that I'm able
Yeah.
to kind of apply in both spaces.
So because you work in, that's interesting. So I'm going to ask you this question. It's popped in my
Yeah.
head as soon as you literally said that. So because you work in a store, I mean, and you're part of, like you said, that's what you do, the multicultural brand and things
Yeah.
like that. But how has it been for you to see the growth, honestly, of dolls that
Mm,
represent all different facets of who we are. Right? How does that feel for you? Because I'm sure when you were doing it back in 2016, there wasn't a big flurry of them. Now, I say within the last 2 to 3 years, maybe, there's been a lot more dolls coming out, with more natural hair. They can wash their hair, all types of dolls like that.
yeah.
How does that feel for you as a doll maker,
Yeah.
to know how important that is, and to see their brands, reaching those heights.
Yeah, I think for me, I see it as a blessing. Um, you know, I work for a company where I also get to talk with a number of these founders who are also working on bringing their dolls into
Mm-hmm.
the store, or, and I get to learn from them, but also like amplify and celebrate that. Because
Yeah.
I do that and celebrate that in my marketing, even in my own business. Like
Yeah.
I'm highlighting some of the other brands that I love, and I'm just like, yes, it is great to see more of us out there. I don't see it
Yeah.
as competition and scarcity. I see
Mm-hmm.
it as abundance
Yes.
and a necessity of like, no, the goal is that, we shouldn't have less than 30% of Black dolls on the show. We should
Right.
have the same way there's like 10,000 Barbies and American Girls and all these other
Mm-hmm.
white dolls that exist from many companies. It gives just more choices and it
Yes.
gives more options. And so I am not of the belief that like, oh man, this just means there's more competition. No, it's like I
No.
from other ones, I engage with other founders too and learn from their process. And yes,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. Not everybody's willing to share their manufacturer. About that. But that's a whole other topic.
That's a whole
But
whole nother show, girl.
yeah,
Whole
it's a
nother
whole other
show.
show. It's like it's not about scarcity.
Ah,
Let's get out of that mindset.
yes.
It's
You
like
have to.
yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so but I celebrate it. I
Yeah.
celebrate it, and I will go as well and support and shop other Black dolls
Mm-hmm.
to just continue to learn and see the excitement of seeing another founder
Yeah.
and just doing it. Like I just discovered, we sell at Target now like a doll, a Black doll from a founder that's specifically focused on HBCU culture.
Nice. Okay.
And
Very
it's like
nice.
specifically like, and that's a unique niche to like have, the same way of having plus size dolls. Like
Yeah.
it's more of that variety is needed and that level of dimensionality and diversity is needed. And so I just think like having dolls that are teaching kids about, their natural hair, having dolls that teach them, about their well-being, having
Mm-hmm.
dolls that teach about embracing your all of your body in every size, shape, and form.
Yes. It's
Whether so it all needs so I one day want to be able to see like 80+% of the shells.
right.
Really. And having Black dolls, having Latino and Latina dolls, having dolls
Yes.
that, seeing having a hijab on, having,
Yes.
different ability dolls, different size dolls, different,
Mm-hmm.
like boy dolls. And so
Yes.
that is really where I think when the shells are really reflected on that, and just one person's kind of success is another person's spark, and
Right.
being able to just learn from each other, and then hopefully that encourages, and I think hopefully that helps to break down some of those entry barriers of
So
being able,
true.
yeah,
Yeah, so true. I mean, I do hope that would be the case, right? That
yeah,
it does help to break down some of those, entry barriers, because I think that's a huge challenge, because a lot of people think about, oh, I want to create this doll. They don't come from having a bunch of money. They have this idea,
yeah,
and they're like, they
yeah,
really want to see this doll represented, and creating dolls can be very expensive to do. So I do understand why there are not a lot of them on the shelves, and I do understand why sometimes people may opt to just create a fabric doll or create something else that is so the materials are so much more obtainable to
Yeah.
attainable for them, as opposed to getting into manufacturing because not even do you not just have to do manufacturing, you have to do shipping, you have to do
Mm,
all those other things to get your doll here. So it's not, it's just so many different steps, and each one of those steps costs money. So I do really hope that because we are now getting into the stores more, it does help with that, like you said, gaining entry into more people creating dolls because of that. So
yeah, I think just to add on to your point as well, like getting access to information. Like to
yes.
your point, like I know we kind of brushed over the manufacturer piece, but like
Hmm.
even just getting an idea of like, hey, like how did you find your manufacturer? Or
Right.
like where do you because like that plays such a like we can't, it's not I'm not gonna speak like for some other products where like, oh, I can make this in my kitchen and
Right.
I can get it. It's like no, like
Right.
basically every doll manufacturer is overseas, unless you're making cloth dolls or plush or something of that nature. But
Hmm.
for the most part, if you're looking at plastic in any way, shape, or form, like
Yes.
vinyl, like you
Yeah.
you're figuring that overseas,
Yeah.
and it's a lot to
Hmm.
break into that if you're not the big wigs and the big dogs, and even just like finding networks. Like I'll be honest with you, another story, another fun fact about me. When I was on my journey after college to try to just mentoring young girls, still learning more about the doll industry, I joined a doll club.
Mm.
So I lived in LA for a while and I was the youngest member, but I loved it because all those women were like my aunties and
Oh, that
they
was
like
nice. Yeah.
and it was just learning from them. And I think it was such a great and it was one of the very few at least probably one of the very few in LA, if not probably the only black doll
Mm.
club.
Wow.
And I used to go to doll shows and just like learn more about the context dolls, like the Marie Alexander dolls, all
Hmm.
these various just and they gave me such rich history because
Yeah.
I said I didn't know yet at the time, like, do I want to do what type of doll materials, da, da, da.
Right.
And so
Hmm.
I thought it was a great way to just like let me like be a student and just learn more about the history of black dolls.
Wow.
And, so
That's
I did that.
great.
I did that for, like a year and,
Hmm.
like, just going to events, meeting with the women at their homes, hearing
Hmm.
their stories, and I told them, I said, "I'm interested in, like, one day creating my own company, but I'm just excited to learn."
Yeah.
So yeah, like, that was such an amazing experience and being able to
Wow.
go to doll shows and see that lens of it.
That's great. I mean, you have had a vast experiences, and I really I'm excited about all the knowledge that you have acquired, right, to create this company and all the knowledge that you have to move it forward. Because I think a lot of times, when you create a doll, I mean, you're not just creating a doll because you want the doll to go out there. So you have to know how to market. You have to know how to, what I mean, reach the people that you need to reach, and all of those things that come into play with creating a doll. It's just like, oh, I have a doll and that's it, right? Now you have a doll, now you have to move that doll somewhere, right? You have to
Yeah.
be able to do that. So I think you come to the table with really a lot of vast knowledge that can help you to build your business to where you want it to be. So I think that's phenomenal. Now that's what I think, right? When do you feel the same way as far as the information that you have acquired through school and all the knowledge that you have learned? Does that help you to to sell your dolls, right, and also to actually find unique and creative ways to market your dolls?
It's interesting where it's like it sometimes like and maybe I'm hard on myself, but sometimes I'm like, "Man, like, I'm good at doing marketing for someone else, and I feel not as great at doing marketing for myself."
Literally just said something to somebody that about that today because I'm going to a doll show. I haven't been to a doll show and I cannot tell you how many years. So I'm on Canva doing a postcard, and now I do Canva. I do business cards for people. I do
Mm,
postcards. I do fly. I do a lot because I love that creativity. I could create postcards and business cards for everybody else, but why am I struggling to create a card to take with me to this doll show? I'm like, I don't understand. Just, I'm
oh
like
my god.
having such a hard time. So
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. How you can
Yeah.
do it for everybody else. And
And
then
exactly, like, it and that and, I have, like, a social media contractor who works with me and, like, who's helping me think about I'm like, "I have the vision, I have the approach, I know what I should be doing," but when it comes to I think, like, when I'm doing events and, like, speaking opportunities and things of that nature or interviewing, it's like, I can I can speak it, I can give the narrative. It's like, okay, how do I also think about for my site presence? How do I think about that? And making sure that story is always consistently coming out. Because there's things
mhm.
I've shared here that I'm realizing, man, I don't think I've really shared that as much,
Right,
even
yeah.
in my own marketing to even think about like
Mhm,
that piece of it. And then how do I leverage that from a PR standpoint to build more awareness? How do I leverage that to grow more sales? And
mhm,
so I have been taking some further time to think more differently about kind of not differently, but like thinking a bit more about that strategy and like
mhm,
how do I really piece together
mhm,
the brand story, not just when I'm speaking it, but also like how do I
mhm.
package that
Package it, right.
in a really good, consistent way
Mhm,
that is because I'm engaging, like, I have my brand, showing up, I'm starting now to engage as well with, like, just, online retailers and just
mhm,
testing that out, and then just
mm,
like, "Okay, how do I position, like, this in the way that I'm also speaking it, but really in a way that is clear and, like, can g give the credit give the true,
mhm,
acknowledgement what the brand is really representing and how it does connect and sell, with families and young
mhm.
kids. But I think it's something that I will be honest, I'm still working through. I am still working through.
Well, I hate to say this, but it makes us feel like we have some hope, right? Like the people, the people who don't have those marketing skills and things like that was like, oh, okay, wait a minute, okay, I understand.
Yeah,
But no,
it's
I
like
understand that because it's you,
yeah,
it's your stuff, it's your baby,
yes,
it's your, it's everything that you have put into that. So
yes.
I kind of do understand that, but it does make us feel a little bit better there. I'm just gonna say.
It's like, oh, yeah, and then, like, some people, like, I in terms of, like, hey, they just went out there, had the product, and they just, like, showed up, when I'm doing, like, the last event that I was able to do, like, I think roughly a month or so ago, like, garnered amazing sales and sold out of my book while I was there, garnered great and made a lot of new
Nice.
contacts and connections and working on new
Hmm.
kind of partnerships from that. And I was like, man, okay, the way I'm doing that when I'm doing these events, either I just need to increase a lot more events, or how do I really work on making sure I'm
Yes.
packaging that
Yes.
across the board in every way? And that's what I'm continuing to work.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. I think you're doing an amazing job, and I'm excited to find out about the new dolls that are coming out and
Yeah.
see the continued work that you're doing to represent and have representation, of young, like you said, unstoppable girls of color and multicultural girls as well. I'm so excited about your journey, and I can't wait to see where your vision has taken you,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
um
Yes, I
so
got
very
big
cool.
goals. I have big goals. I have it doesn't for me, it doesn't even just end at the dolls,
Oh,
and,
no,
like,
I'm sure. Yes, I'm
yeah,
positive of that.
and it's like, yeah, unstoppable does not yeah, does not stop
It
anymore.
means unstoppable. It
It
means
means
it's not
unstoppable
stopping,
for that,
right?
it means unstoppable. That word was so intentional.
So intentional, man. Well, thank you so much, Flora. Hey, let everybody know where they can find your amazing dolls at and connect with you so they could see what you're up to.
Yes, so, you can
Yay!
find
Hi,
Alita
Leah.
and her cool shoes and her matching outfit. Some people say actually she looks like me, but I don't
Yeah,
know if
she did. So I was going to ask you that. She does look like you.
oh, like I said, I put together a collage of 50 faces. The guy never
Mm-hmm.
saw me who created the design,
It's
but
so funny.
I love that. I love that. So yes, you can find Corage Dolls at www.coragedolls.com. Also follow us across social media from Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, at Corage Dolls at our handle, and reach out to me, whether it be through socials and connect. I would love to connect, would love to, engage more with manufacturers if we want to talk about that, or just the idea of continuing to find other amazing creators or designers who are just wanting to create more representation on and on our shelves. So
Very
love
cool.
it.
Thank you. Thank you so much again for being a guest on In the Doll World. Like I said, I'm excited about your dolls. I'm excited to learn where you're going, to know that you're going many places with them, and that the fact that you bring such great characters to life through your dolls. So I'm excited. I'm excited for you. And again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes, thank you so much, Georgette. Thank you for giving this platform
Oh, you're
to
so
amplify
welcome.
our stories and the work in the path that you've paved, especially in the doll world. So appreciate that and continuing to support you in that.
Well, thank you so much, love. I really appreciate that. Okay, everybody, make sure you check out In the Doll World. You can check us out on In the Doll World. .com. Just don't forget, we're on Instagram, Facebook, all the social media, and yes, you can get our show on Alexa too now. Just ask Alexa to open up Doll World, and you'll get the latest episode on that. So, thank you again for listening to In the Doll World, and thank you again, Flora, for being a guest on In the Doll World. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, bye, everybody. Bye.